Hi, everybody. This is Bill from Billboard Comics, and I am here back with another edition of Growing Up Comics, where I go down memory lane and take you with me and talk about stuff that I kind of found interesting, unique, or, you know, weird in my past collecting of comic books. I'm going to start this one off about saying about how much I loved baseball when I was a kid. There's a video on the site about how I started becoming a collector. I came through like the world of baseball cards through my father, and the reason why I was such a big baseball card collector because I loved baseball when I was a kid. When I was about 5 to 9, I could probably tell you every player on every team from the National League to the American League, up and down and whatever. One of my favorite things to do in the morning was like go to comic strips, and after that I go to the transaction section in the sports area, where they listed all the people who were either hurt or being let go or released or signed a new contract or traded to another team. I was always fascinated about a player who was playing for the Cleveland Indians in one day and then comes to the Phillies the next year, and gets traded for money, and I thought that was fascinating. Like, one of the most interesting things about baseball that I've ever experienced was the story of Joel Youngblood. Joel Youngblood is not except for one little aspect, a big name in the history of baseball. He's not like a Mike Schmidt or a Babe Ruth or a Pete Rose or even a Steve Carlton or Sandy Koufax. But he is known for one thing. He's a guy who was traded between two teams on the same day, and he played for both teams on the same day. He was with the Mets, and he played in Chicago. I forget. I think it was like maybe 84, 85. He played in Wrigley Field for the Mets. I think he got a couple RBIs. He actually had a pretty good game, and he was pulled in the middle of the game and said, "Hey, you've been traded." Okay, can I finish the game? No, you have to go to Philadelphia where because you've been traded to the Montreal Expos, and they are short on players, and they need you to play tonight, so you have to go there. So he went back to his hotel room, checked out, got all his clothes put together, came back to the ballpark because he left his glove there, got on a train or plane or whatever, made it to Philly, probably a train because you could get there within a couple hours, got there for the night game in Philadelphia and played for the Montreal Expos on the same day. That's baseball history for you. But those card trades fascinated me. And you don't actually see that in the world of comic books that often. You do see creators, kind of like one creator works on a series and moves on to something else, and then maybe another creator comes in and works on a series, and there's a passage of time, and creator A would be on the book that creator B started off with, and then vice versa and stuff like that. But you don't actually see like a one-for-one trade kind of thing, because basically comic books is not like a baseball corporation or industry or has the same kind of contract structure or anything like that. You don't really see that. There's no really need to actually say like, hey, you know what, I'm Frank Miller has been injured. He's got turf toe. We need to get a replacement penciler for Daredevil. Can you trade me George Perez and a player to be named anchor to be named later? You won't see that. However, there was one trade as I was growing up in comic books, and it boggles my mind when it happened. I was kind of blown away when it happened, and it happened with one of the most powerful and most popular comic book writer artists of the day, and one of the most prolific and, if somewhat tragic, store of writers in comic books. So let me just say this off the bat. I'm a big fan of John Byrne. I am not fanatically devoted to him. I think I've said this before, and this could be. I apologize if it's repeating. But I'm not a big fan of him. Some of the things he says kind of irks me. But I grew up with his artwork and loving his storytelling and loving the way he could draw a character and set up a page and control a story. He's one of my favorite artists. He might be my second favorite artist next to George Perez. And he's, a legend in this industry. And, I had a chance to meet him at New York Comic Con a couple times, like a while back. And I got his autograph, and to my books. And I was like really, I was blown away. I was actually never thought I was ever going to be able to meet him at all. But I digress. But during this time when I was growing up, anything John Byrne did, I tried to track down. I mean, within reason. And it was kind of easy back then because he only was doing 2 books at the time. At the time when I started like really following John Byrne, he was doing Fantastic Four, which he did the artwork for, and he was, kind of eventually moved on to writing and drawing it. And it's also doing, after a while, he did a spin-off from the X-Men called Alpha Flight. John Byrne's a Canadian artist, and this was a superhero kind of team set in the Great White North. And it was right up his alley. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for him writing and drawing it, I probably would have picked up the Alpha Flight series because what do I know of Canada? Later, I actually turned out later on that I would actually honeymoon across Canada and take a train ride across the beautiful country, and meet all the wonderful people and have wonderful experiences that I'll keep with me for the rest of my life. But as how old was I at the time? Probably like 13-year-old kid. But John Byrne, definitely. So, but I eventually fell in love with the characters and stuff like this. But around 1985, 1986, John Byrne was starting to get a little burned out by Alpha Flight. He had plenty of ideas for Fantastic Four. He would go into that for another couple years. Alpha Flight, he was kind of running out a little bit. And I guess then one time, as the story goes, maybe in like a just a BS session around the bullpen, he said something about wow, I really wish Incredible Hulk went back to basics, have Hulk being a monster and stuff like this, and that'd be really cool. Jim Shooter kind of took that as a pitch, and he goes, "Great, you'll start on it next month. Let me see your script." John Byrne, incredibly prolific, very talented, was kind of busy. Like I said, he had the 2 books, but he was also doing a whole bunch of side stuff. Like he did a special Galactus story that was an Epic magazine. He did a whole bunch of kind of covers for everything from Power Man and Iron Fist to Peter Parker's Spider-Man to Marvel Team Up to everything. He was a name character. He got money in, so if you put it on a cover, you'll sell more books because he was that good of an artist. So he knew he couldn't do everything. He couldn't keep Alpha Flight and Fantastic Four and start doing the Hulk all together. Especially he was doing writing and art and everything like that, which I think Shooter expected him to do. So he had to make a Sophie's choice, so to speak. And since he was already kind of reaching the end of his rope with Alpha Flight, he decided to actually have that one be the one to go. And you might think it's just basically okay, well, John Byrne's off this. Let's have, say, Roger Stern and Paul Smith take it over. And, but instead, they decided to have a crossover between the current team, the current installment of The Incredible Hulk, which was written by Bill Mantlo, drawn by Mike Mignola, that is the same Mike Mignola who created Hellboy, who was inked by Jerry Tallock. And sidebar, it's not really germane to the entire story to begin with, but Jerry Tallock was, I think, even as a kid, I thought one of the worst inkers ever. Mike Mignola was one of my favorite artists, even back then. He had nice use of black and evocative stuff. He was not a lot of heavy detail, a lot of just basically pen and ink work. But I really liked the way he drew characters. I made him they kind of had a surreal kind of nature to them, but you could still tell them they're on there. Everybody looked individually. You could tell their emotions and stuff like this. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. I'm not alone in that. But this is during the beginning of his career, an early part of his career. And he was inked by Jerry Tallock. Jerry Tallock was a Filipino artist who got started in DC Comics on a whole bunch of workbooks and horror books, which, take that as you will, but the quality of those books and people came up there. But he came up through the school and studio of another Filipino artist called Tony DeZuniga. Now, if you, I believe I talked about Todd McFarlane past in this on my channel before, and about how he made his debut in Infinity Inc. And he was inked by DeZuniga, and DeZuniga kind of like basically ruined his artwork. It was kind of like he wasn't actually an inker; he's more of like a a border collie trying to keep his creative genius in line and try to like make him become a more conventional comic book artist. And Todd McFarlane, another one of my favorite artists, was not conventional in any way, and he excelled once he had the freedom and he was away from Disney and had like better inkers when he came to Marvel. But that I digress. Jerry Tyler came up through that whole thing, and he had the same kind of approach to the inking, where he would try to mold Mignola's artwork into something more conventionally comic book-ish. I'll show some examples up here if you want to see it, and you can see how it is. And if you're familiar with Mike Mignola's artwork, you will see what I'm talking about how Jerry Talek was just a horrible inker for him. Maybe I'll do a segment on the worst inkers in comic book history. Oh, I have a list. No, if you're overpowering the pencils too much, you're not doing your job. That's my hot take on inking. Please come at me in the comments, all you inkers out there. But I digress. They decided instead of hey, we'll leave, we'll go on to something else, they'll just swap books. So Bill Mantlo, Mike Mignola, and Jerry Talek took over Alpha Flight when John Byrne was taking over the Incredible Hulk. And he did so in a unique kind of crossover kind of thing. It got its start out in Alpha Flight number 78. The main principal at the time was basically they had a character called Sasquatch, and for some reason, I think his body passed away, but his cognizance, his spirit, still was alive, and they're trying to find another receptacle for him to use to come back to life. Especially his girlfriend Aurora, who is I'm not going to go into all this stuff like this, but they're trying to find another body for him, and they're looking everywhere, and they're looking at all alternate dimensions, and they find this but they want somebody who's kind of a burly kind of like Sasquatch guy, a strong guy, a big guy, so he could actually come in and still be part of the team and help them out. So they go through all these alternate dimensions and stuff like this, and stuff is they came across this big burly guy who kind of looked like Sasquatch. He was big, didn't really have hair on it, but they couldn't really make him out. They just had an outline of him, kind of like a heat signature kind of stuff. And wow, this guy's perfectly, and he's mindless. We can't get any intelligent readings off him at all. Turns out that guy was the Hulk, and in 313 it also helps with as part of the crossover from say about since the character came back from the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, things were changing for the Incredible Hulk. During the time before Secret Wars, Bruce Banner got his intelligence back, and he was able to be intelligent as the Hulk as he was in real life. He got a pardon. He was become more respected by his peers. Things were going good until, Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. During that thing, he broke his leg in a way that didn't heal. Even though later on they'd say he'd have hero healing powers, which didn't really work. Comic books, don't worry about it. But he came back, and during the parts there, he was kind of he was forced to actually become angrier, let go of his control over the Hulk's bestial side. A very important one, an iconic one, referenced in the Avengers Endgame thing, is one where he's Doctor Doom drops a mountain on the heroes, and we think they're dead until next issue, where we see Hulk propping it up, and he's he doesn't know he could do it, and Reed Richards is just insulting him constantly, getting him angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. So he gets stronger and stronger and stronger, because even back then, the angrier he got, the stronger he got. So he could actually keep the mountain up longer until they could figure a way to blast their way out of it. But that kind of set him down the road of kind of losing control over the Hulk, and he, instead of becoming like like the Banner Hulk, he became even more bestial and more monstrous than before. By the time like issue 300 came around, like it looked like Banner wasn't even involved anymore. He wasn't even there. He was just a mindless brute who was just destroying New York City, and he had to figure out a way to actually stop him from destroying New York City. And part of this would be to take him to this big crossroads dimension, which has like entrance points, different other like planets and realities and stuff like this, where he could maybe find some place where he could fit in, like like if there's a planet of Hulks or something like that or whatever, so you could find a place where he could be like, so like kind of like what they did with Planet Hulk, and they shot him off into space. This was the alternate to that. They had in like an alternate reality, and from like 300 to 313, he was going. It was like kind of like basically like a Hulk anthology. He'd go to a different reality, come across different problems, different people, different reality, different stuff, different situations, and then like erase the board and start over again with the next issue, kind of thing. It was kind of like, I remember reading it and I was like kind of like, okay, when is this going to be over? When is he coming back? I mean, he's going to come back eventually, right? Why am I seeing him hanging out with like blue people and orange people on a planet that don't really care about, that I've never seen before? But no, I mean, like, nothing against Bill Mantelow's writing or anything artwork, but it was just like, it seemed like it was like spinning its wheels. It wasn't really going as good as it could have been or should have been. So like the change was also good for that title too. It gave them a new fresh outlook on this. So getting back to the whole plot line, in the Alpha Flight number 78, they find the Hulk in this alternate reality and bring him in. They have like a cosmic fishing line and bring him in with the idea of like just having Walter Lankowski's mind go into the Hulk's body. It doesn't work because Hulk comes out there and like just decides to destroy Alpha Flight to try to, like, why did you bring me back? Basically, it comes down like kind of like another thing, like compared to another book that came after it, like Doomsday. He comes there, he goes through the entire thing until like Snowbird comes in. Snowbird is a member of, she could channel the great beasts of Canada, and using that she becomes Sasquatch herself and fights him, and they basically lose. They kind of like say their bones are intact, but they got totally housed by the Hulk, and Hulk leaps off into America, and they get a new status quo. And I think like as the Hulk is bounding off, like the government says, we want you to become a thing. We'll pay you like a whole bunch of money to do this. Yay! So they have a new status quo immediately right off the bat. You can see where Mantlo and company are going with that. And then it goes into Incredible Hulk 314, which is shows him kind of like, again, traveling across the United States. And this time people are like realize, okay, he's back, and something's off about him. He is not the kind of guy who used to be there beforehand and stuff like this. He is kind of like, he's more bestial. We need to do something about it. And like they create a new Hulkbusters to track him down, and eventually like the scientists come there, figure out a way to make the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner two separate people. Neither one of them at full strength and everything, and I think if Byrne stayed with the thing, there might become an issue of like, both of them one of them or both of them are going to die, because Banner became sickly because he wasn't a full human being, because they're one person. It's just that the Hulk like it's kind of like taking a whole bunch of like taking your arm off and taking it over there, and okay, I need the arm, but the arm's over there doing something. It's kind of like one of those things. So that's how that's a big storyline that got the whole thing switched over. Needless to say, I followed John Byrne over to the Hulk, and that was fun while it lasted. It was only on the title. Like I said, this whole thing happened back on between issues 28 and 29 of Alpha Flight. So he was on Alpha Flight for well over 2 years. He lasted on the Incredible Hulk basically 6 issues, from 314 to 319. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 6 issues. There's been a lot of stuff online about what's going on. To put it simply, it's creative differences with Jim Shooter. I'm sure whatever even though Jim Shooter thought it was a great idea when Byrne suggested it, I think a lot of the ideas that came in besides that didn't really fly with him. So there's a lot of back and forth and creative differences between the two of them. Byrne got so frustrated. He just had to go and he just had to go over to DC and revamp Superman. How he's that angry. No, but that happened around the same time. He kind of like why am I staying here? I'm I'm the big draw for the company, and I have to be nickel and dime by Jim Shooter on a book that I was only casually interested in. And okay, sayonara. So he eventually left, and Al Milgrom was taken over to be writer-artist on it, who would wrap up his kind of stuff like this. And, once he got done with that, got a whole bunch of other artists in there. Eventually, Peter David came in to write it, and a scrappy young Canadian, again, Canada. Great artist up there. A guy I think I have mentioned before, Todd McFarlane. Yeah, that happened. But it's one of things like, what if John Byrne didn't have to fight tooth and nail to get every kind of plot done with Jim Shooter? What if he had a free sailing to do whatever he wanted, and he had an end plan, and he went through it, and he could have been on there for 20, 30 issues, maybe longer. We were talking about his legendary lengthy run on the Hulk, and Todd McFarlane might not become the Todd McFarlane that he wanted to. Todd McFarlane might be still trying to do like fill-in issues for G.I. Joe, or maybe doing a lower rank Marvel book, and he would never be able to jump from the Hulk to Amazing Spider-Man, and then from Spider-Man to his own written and drawn Spider-Man, and then from there on to being part of Image, creating Image with Spawn. It's just fun to think about, just thinking like if things went different, we might not have a whole company, or at least the company be short one member. Who knows? On the Alpha Flight thought about this, Bill Mantlo stayed on the title until number 66, but he didn't have Mike Mignola the whole time. Mike Mignola only stayed around till number 31. I can't really blame him. I would try to get as far away from Jerry Talick as I possibly could. Talick only stayed on there until number, I think, 35 as anchor, and then Bill Mantlo came in there and had a whole bunch of other artists come in. David Ross, a very underrated artist of the Marvel comics, and I think maybe did some work on DC comics too. Very underrated. I think he did a really good job with storytelling and character work. Sal Buscema did stuff like this. June Brigman did a couple issues on that, and oh god, they got somebody in who was like his first Marvel work. I think short name, 6 letters, 3 in the first name, 3 in the last one. What could that be? I'm thinking somebody who is kind of like, on Todd McFarlane level, like they're connected somehow. Jim Lee, does that sound right? Yes, Jim Lee made his Marvel Comics debut on this title with issue 53. And, I wish I could show you pictures of it here, but Marvel, for whatever reason, it only has the Byrne run of Alpha Flight on their Marvel Unlimited program, and the one issue where the follow-up issue when Bill Mantlo and Mike Mignola and Jerry Talick take over, and then after that it's like spotchy. I think the next one is 66, and next one is 114. I think they might have the one where North Star comes out, but it's fundamentally lacking of issues of this comic book, and that's a shame, because just from a historical standpoint, I don't know how much money it costs to actually house every issue of every comic book on this service, but from a historical perspective, you should at least have Jim Lee's first artwork at Marvel there, even though, I don't know if he left on good standing or whatever. I mean, they brought him back for Heroes Reborn, but it's like, come on. Let us see, his first artwork on Alpha Flight. I mean, I'm sure they have every X-Men issue, so his first work on the X-Men is there. But but I digress. Um, the storylines, as I recalled, because like I said, I couldn't really read up on it due to the fact that they are not on Marvel Universe. I'm like, Alpha Flight is in another location, undisclosed location, that we really don't want to talk about. So I couldn't really read it, but as I recall, I think it's like Alpha Flight got really weird, thanks to Bill Mantlo, and I think, and also like it with like Defenders were kind of like the proto Vertigo for Marvel. If Marvel was going to start a Vertigo series imprint, those books would go into it because they went into some really daffy, really weird kind of subjects and topics and stuff like that. It's really daffy. There's a hero who I think was like at the same time his past self, his present self, and his future self, and they all came together to fight crime. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think there's a villain called Pestilence. I think that was like really, really gross, really gruesome. Great characters like Nemesis. Nemesis was like a really interesting character. Deadly Ernest was another character who came in along this run, I believe. So I would love to read all of those without having to like dig up my original copies of them from storage, but it's not to be. Marvel, get on that. So that's the big major comic book trade from my youth that I remember, and I just thought it was like so trippy. It was like, wow, why don't they do this more often? Probably because you can't always have people who are interested in taking a new assignment, then somebody wants to take over your book. And at least at this time, it works out that the people who were replaced by John Byrne had another place to go, and didn't have to like try to go through. Although Bill Mantlo, I think, was doing like 15 books for Marvel at the time, so he didn't really have to worry about it. Mike Mignola I think this was his only book, so he, again, like, if he didn't do the trade or whatever, if they just decided to like bring Byrne on the book and just, okay, guys, good luck finding other work, would he be big enough to create? Like, would he be able to do Cosmic Odyssey and all of a sudden they made his name in comic books? And then would he be able to be in a position to create Hellboy, who, like, would be, like, we'd be without that and all the movies and all the stuff like this and Guillermo del Toro's. That's what I love about What If as a concept. There's so many things that, like, one little thing being off could change the direction of history in so many great things. But if you always wonder why, like back before Hellboy made his first appearance in a John Byrne book, I think there might be a little connection starting here with that. I could be wrong. I might be, but if I am, tell me in the comments. Also, tell me in the comments if you remember this trade. Were you excited by it? Were you confused by it? Did it make a difference? Did you acknowledge it? Were you reading one and not the other, and like saying like, oh wow, the book just got better, or the book just got worse, whichever one you were reading. Would you wish this to happen again? If you had to, which creative team would you want to trade from one book to another book, and vice versa? Let's start a conversation in the actual comments. I would love to hear that. That'd be pretty interesting. And, I have faith that all you people who are watching this, be you 2 or be you 202, I don't know how this is going to do, would be able to put something very witty and very, very smart in there because of that. But I digress. Like, share, subscribe. Helps the algorithm. Helps you find more of these stuff if you like it. Until I see you again, keep on collecting.